All right, we're back for another awesome episode here, episode 113 of the Freight 360 podcast. Ben, how you doing today, man?
Doing well. Week's going well. No complaints.
Nice. So today's episode, we're gonna talk about the requirements to be a freight broker, and we're gonna talk about what they are and why they exist. But first, welcome back to Freight 360. If you are brand new here, welcome to our show. It's every Friday. We drop on all your podcasting sources and YouTube Friday Eastern at midnight. That's in the morning. So you West Coasters and everyone else get a sneak peek Thursday evening. Hit up that 5-star review on iTunes. We're ranking good. I actually haven't looked at any reviews lately, but they're always really good. So thanks everyone for the positive feedback. Share us with your friends too. We love to grow the audience by getting blown up with questions. So keep them coming. You can always go to freight360.net, hit the contact form, and shoot us your question. We've got a handful of them that we've gotten over. So before today's episode content, I want to recap some sports here real quick. So first of all, before NFL, I want to talk about one of my favorite sports of baseball. It's over. The Atlanta Braves won the World Series this week, 4-2 over the Houston Astros. So if you're an American League fan and you don't like the Astros, you're probably happy to see that. I can tell you that I was happy as a Red Sox fan because they beat the Red Sox. But hey, first time in I think it was like 26 years they won. Freddie Freeman, the first baseman, got a ring finally. So.
I remember when they won the last one. I was a big baseball fan in the 80s and the 90s. And the 90s, I was a huge Pirate fan. And the Braves were a big rival of the Pirates back, 25 some years ago.
Yeah,
right
1995. Yeah, so I mean, you think about it. Back then, the Braves, before, the crazy cable packages that are out there now and satellite and streaming services, the Braves were pretty much the team that everyone got to watch because it was owned by Turner, right? And TBS is who broadcasted their games. So I remember growing up watching them a lot. And then as I grew up and picked the team, it ended up being the Red Sox just because my family liked them. But yeah, good for the Braves. Glad to see it. On to football. The Tennessee Titans might have lost Derrick Henry for this season due to an injury. He's the one that busted like 100-some yards against the Bills.
Yeah.
Put a TD or two in there, and everyone was upset. But so what Tennessee did is they signed Adrian Peterson, that old guy, he's like 36 now, onto their practice squad. So might be seeing Adrian Peterson playing for the Titans the rest of the year. I don't know. Isn't it crazy to think about? I mean, Adrian Peterson is a guy that we've heard his name for close to 2 decades now in football.
Yeah.
So
we'll see. I know they were talking about the season pretty much being down the chute when he got hurt, and they called him out for the season.
Well,
but
I think people started talking like the Titans could be a real Super Bowl contender, definitely an AFC contender, and now it's like, can they? I don't know. You hate to see one player make that up, and I understand if it's your quarterback, right? Because that's the heartbeat of your team. But to lose a running back and that be your season, that's tough, man.
But back in the day, I mean, like even like when Jerome Bettis, right, was a major player for the Steelers, like the whole offense changed without him. You don't really, in some of the, like you lose the ability to do other things because that threat's not there, right?
Yeah.
And like even if they're not the whole team, obviously, right, it really limits a lot of things when they're that dominant of a player.
Yeah,
we'll see.
That's a good point. It's a good point. It just shows how integral each player really is. Looking forward to this weekend. And I have the upcoming games in our show notes now because I tend to scramble to ESPN to try and pull up the right lines and all that. But Buffalo at Jacksonville, I mean, they got a 14.5-point spread on that. It was this close same spread against Miami last weekend, and Buffalo cleared it by a point or two. I think they'll do the same, if not more, this weekend in Jacksonville. And then Monday Night Football, your Steelers are hosting Chicago, man. The Bears. So, and you guys are favored by almost a touchdown on that one. So I like that. 6.5 points. Steelers, man, you can't rule them out.
They're inching along. I mean, they looked pretty good last week. I mean, We'll see.
They're making the moves that they have to make. So, and hey, we're about halfway through the season, just about at that point now. A lot of teams are hitting their bye weeks and whatnot. So now this is when it really matters. Wins and losses truly matter. Hey, Pat Mahomes got the Chiefs back to 500 after the win on this past week's Monday Night Football. That was close, though. I honestly thought against the Giants there, when the Giants were up, I was like, dude, the Chiefs could possibly be 3-5 after this week, but they pulled it off. They got the win by a field goal. So, yeah, that's all I got for sports, man. That's it. You know what I'm excited for, though? I kind of miss talking about golf with you because you keep me in the loop on it in the spring and summer months, and now it's like, man, nothing.
And it'll be coming back around again soon.
Hey, my Buffalo Sabres are actually like a decent team this year. I might have to be a bandwagon fan if they keep trending in the right direction.
I haven't even been following a lot. I mean, well, most of what I pick up is Pittsburgh radio in the morning, and it's been mostly Steelers. I haven't even really heard much about what the Penguins have been doing lately.
I haven't tracked much hockey. I just hear it on local news, but like the Sabres went from like ranked 32 to like 18 or something like that. So they've made their way up in the they're middle of the pack now, but it's super early.
Yeah,
I don't know. We'll see what happens.
It's a long season.
Oh, dude, 82 games. Yeah. When you're playing hockey in like May, possibly June, it's like and we're in early November. It's got a long ways to go. It's like baseball, 6 months or so long, but crazy. I don't think it's actually June. I think it's like May that they go to.
It's like May, June.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure, like very early June, depending on how long the series go.
Yeah.
Like it'll make it to June.
Yep, true. Well, cool. Good stuff. Well, hey, before we get into the topic, give us a shout out to our friends over at DAT Freight and Analytics. What do they got going on?
Yeah, taking the guesswork out of freight with DAT. The DAT Load Board Network is the largest on-demand freight marketplace in North America, connecting freight brokers with available capacity on any lane. Grow your business with tools that allow you to find new business partners. Plus, you can quickly qualify and onboard new carriers. And with the industry's leading freight rate data, you can make clear and confident pricing decisions. Check out the show notes for a free month of DAT Power, Express, or Trucker's Edge.
Yep. And there's also an extra link in the show notes for this episode, and it's also from DAT. They do have a service that will walk you through step-by-step how to get your authority, and it's going to cover all the little items we're going to talk about today. So check it out. It's it says get your authority today, and it's a DAT. Basically, you fill out a form to get in touch with them, and you can talk to a rep over there inquiring about how to get all these steps taken care of through DAT to kind of walk you through it, hold your hand. So yeah, requirements, man. This is good, and we get asked this a lot. The content's in our course. There's a lot of confusion around it. I'll be honest, myself, it to this day I still don't fully understand every little detail because it changes. The most recent change, I think, was in the last 5 years as far as what they require. And we'll talk about it. We'll get into it. But what are your thoughts overall on their requirements? Is it easy to understand for somebody? I think it's an easy set of tasks to get done.
So it's interesting, right? Because it's not something you look at a lot once you've done them.
Right.
And I'm really interested in this because I haven't had to set up a lot of brokerages, right? Like I've worked more with them, more of the established. I do that more now and over the past year or two, but you've spent the better part of a decade working with businesses that are coming into it, going out of it, changing hands. So kind of for the listeners, going to be a little change of pace. Like I'm going to be interviewing Nate, and I genuinely don't know some of the answers to these. So I'm really kind of interested to dig into what they are, why they are, and just kind of riff on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So speaking of, let's kick it off with the first one. What licenses and why?
Yeah. So let me step back a couple steps here and just highlight. There's 3 main steps to getting your brokerage up and running, but there's some sub steps and we're going to talk about them. And those steps are getting your authority, which is your license. And then there's having the proper insurance in place and making sure you have your process agents listed. And we're going to talk about what all that means in the little subcategories that are below it. But yeah, like you said, first one is the license. Okay. So, oftentimes people say like, hey, do I have to go get certified to be a freight broker? And the answer is no. There's no certification. You literally just get a license from the FMCSA. And ironically, right, you go get a license to drive a car, you have a written test and you have a road test. There's no test when it comes to getting licensed as a freight broker. It's like if you can check the box, you're good to go. It's wild. So the FMCSA, it's the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, has there's a variety of licenses that they offer, right? So there's brokers, freight forwarders, motor carriers, and depending on which type of those entities you are, you get a different kind of authority. So freight brokers fall under the broker of property category, and that is what their license how it will be spelled out. There's also broker of household goods, which is different. Motor carriers, same thing. They could be a motor carrier of property or of household goods. And then there's freight forwarders who have their own different type of authority. So that being said, you get this authority from the FMCSA. You use a system called URS. It's the Unified Registration System, and they've come a long way. It used to be a ton of paperwork that you'd fill out and hand jam and submit. It's all online now, and literally it'll walk you through everything. You pay your $300, and you go through like a protest period of 10 days where people can say, nope, they shouldn't have their authority for whatever reason. Typically 4 to 6 weeks, you're good to go, right? You got to do some more stuff in the meantime. But that's it. You get your authority. And I want to talk about the household goods versus property, right? You and I had
Before we go there, right? So the URS, right, is the Unified Registration System. And this is basically, is it only primarily used for the freight brokerage licenses?
It's licensing for everything FMCSA. So if you're a carrier or a forwarder or a broker, you're going to use the URS to apply for your authority. That is it's their consolidated online system to apply for your authority. Okay, just like if you wanted to go to the DMV and apply for a CDL versus a learner's permit versus your license or get a certain endorsement on it, it's all through one system. But instead of the DMV for us drivers in a regular car, it's the Unified Registration System through the FMCSA for carriers, brokers, and forwarders.
And a little off topic, but the same topic, right? Like the third category on the carrier side, right, it's people, right? Like
transporting,
like school buses,
like buses,
go through the same thing.
Yeah, coach buses, bus driving services, you name it. Yeah, like
three categories, right? Yeah, property, goods, and people, right?
Yeah, yep. And if you literally just go to the FMCSA website, it breaks it all down. You can learn a lot just by going through it. It's also in our course, and I mean, just about anything that we ever talk about, at some point we'll have a video and blog to go along with it. So you can always just sift through our library if you want to learn more, if you're listening to this down the road or watching this down the road. But so like you said, though, passengers, property, and household goods, totally different things, right? And that's the reason that they want to differentiate this. Think about a freight broker, right? We're moving like just goods, commodities, right? Like steel, lumber, produce, right? It's not someone's personal belonging. It's a commodity that belongs to a corporation that needs it moved. Usually it's business to business, typically, right? Whereas household goods, totally separate.
Right. And then the business to business, like sometimes the property changes hands upon receipt, right?
Yeah.
So also different where, household goods, you're moving it for the same owner. It arrives, it's still their property. In a lot of cases, when you're moving goods, like you said, commodities, you're taking it from somebody that owns it to the next person.
Yeah, to whoever they're selling it to or whatever. Yeah. And think about the amount of insurance or risk and liability that goes into each of those three, right? Transporting humans, a lot more insurance required.
Yes.
Versus someone that's moving, $80,000 worth of food. So same thing with household goods. You probably got more than $100,000 worth of goods in a moving truck than a bunch of lumber on a flatbed.
And the other interesting thing is really kind of how that faces the consumers in the United States, right? Like for household goods, you have usually one customer, you move their stuff, and that's it. You've got to go find another customer. If you're moving people, like you're usually doing transactions on an as-needed basis. Like I need to go from here to there. You go and find the bus, it picks you up, right? You're not like booking it or clearly, obviously brokering people. Now the third, the one that's in our niche, like It's completely different, really, than the other two, and it has its own categories for those very same reasons. Different set of risks.
Yep.
Different set of people. Like, you're dealing with the same customer over and over again.
Yeah.
You're dealing with their SOP.
And it's good, though. And to have this stuff regulated and separated out into these categories, it makes a lot of sense. There's no question, what as far as that goes. Now, you do this, and you're going to be awarded an MC number as your motor carrier number. Now, people often ask, well, what about my DOT number? Because a lot of times you'll see a broker or carrier, they've got an MC number and a US DOT number. And the question is, well, do I need both? Here's the deal. Technically, you don't 100% of the time need a DOT number. But I'll tell you that the URS, that system, it's going to get you a DOT number. It'll ask you some questions. It'll pretty much say, yep, you need a DOT number. Last I checked, the only reason you would not need a DOT number is if you are not crossing state lines and you're not ever going to do anything with hazmat or oversized or anything that needs permits. But chances are 99% or higher of brokers and motor carriers need to have that DOT, that US DOT number, right?
But
to be
so to go back
DOT, that's the difference.
Okay, so like going back, like if we were like a motor carrier and we had a customer, and we'll say like we deliver bread locally around whatever the city of Buffalo. You stay there, like in that case, you likely wouldn't need a DOT number,
so
right?
You wouldn't need an MC number or a US DOT number. Remember, US is the United States Department of Transportation.
Right.
If you're just an intra-state carrier, which means you're only conducting business in your state, you can just get licensed by your state. So like New York State DOT would issue me, in that case, a DOT number from New York State. Nothing through FMCSA, nothing from the US DOT. Totally on the state level. Now, as brokers, we can sometimes run into those carriers that they don't have an MC because they only do California or just Texas or whatever. And that's why that is that they don't have an MC number, because they didn't need one. They don't want to pay the $300 or whatever the case might be to get their authority. So,
and that's something I haven't looked at in a while. But when I first learned the industry, I remember looking for that often, making sure the carriers were licensed to be able to go intrastate over interstate.
Yeah.
To the exact opposite.
What's tough is a lot of these carrier vetting systems that we use as brokers, they look at the federal level. And the federal level doesn't always get state updates. That's why you really want to do a good job with these intrastate DOT-only carriers that are only in Texas or only in California, because the information that we have from SaferWatch or SaferWeb or whatever system you're using, Carrier Watch, it's only as good as the last time they updated it. And those state authorities can drop on a day-by-day basis. So, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. In a nutshell, MC number and a DOT number. You're going to get both of those when you apply for your authority. Okay. Next up is insurance, right? And people,
what do we need? Well, first off, what's the difference between, because I know a lot of people ask this question, right? Like, I'm getting a bond, and is that the same as insurance? What do I really need? Do I need the same as? So, like, let's first clarify what a bond is versus insurance, and then we'll go down the insurance rabbit hole.
Yeah. So, so when we say minimum requirement, a freight broker needs to have either a bond or a trust fund that has a face value of $75,000. And that can be, you can do it either of those two ways, right? You can either set up a freight broker trust fund using your BMC Form 85, which you got $75K in the bank or in a trust, in an investment vehicle right there. That way, that $75,000 is there if it's needed. The alternate route, if you don't have the money, is to go buy the insurance product called the surety bond, right? So instead of putting $75K in an account, you're going to pay an insurance company to guarantee that $75,000, and you're going to pay them an annual premium. You might pay $2-3 a year or something like that.
And I want to pause there, right? Because that is not insurance, right?
It's an insurance product, but it's not the way you'd think of it.
Right. It's a bond, and the purpose of that is if you don't pay a carrier or there's a dispute, those carriers can file against your bond, just like in construction. If you don't do your work, you have this bond to protect your customers. This protects the carriers. But again, it goes fast.
Yep.
So it's not a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, think about like a bail bond, right? Let's say they set your bail at $500,000 and you're like, well, I don't have $500,000. lot of times a bail bond company they'll say, give me 10% and I'll put up the money. I'll guarantee the money for you, and you'll get your money. You're good to go after, all is said and done. But guess what? If you don't show up for court,
and they eat it,
then that's they're paying out that money. So that's what a bond is, right? And it is
you do get
an insurance company. So
right, so you do get them from an insurance provider, but they are not insurance, right? So now, what are the requirements of insurance? Like, what are they required to have as a freight broker?
Nothing. I mean, literally, just you guys either have a bond, or the surety. Either a surety bond or a trust fund. So the surety bond is on your BMC Form 84, and your trust fund is BMC 85. You brought up insurance, though. Your customer is going to tell you what insurance you need. So let's make that clear.
You go.
They might say you need $1 million in general liability. You need workers' comp. You need contingent cargo. You need contingent auto liability. There's all kinds of stuff you can add on. Your customer's going to want it. But at a minimum, you don't need it. It's just going to limit who you can work with.
Says so. From a regulatory standpoint, a freight brokerage does not need insurance, but it does need a surety bond.
Correct.
Now, why you actually need insurance is on a per customer basis, right? So you need to first ask anybody that you're going to be shipping with or working with, what are your insurance requirements? And standards are usually 100 a million, right?
Well, so usually you're going to see $1 million in liability, and you might see like $100K in contingent cargo or something like that, because they want to know that if the carriers falls through, that they can potentially go back to yours. Some might tell you they want higher than that, though. Like, for example, Department of Defense or military or government type stuff. You could be, that you might need $3 or $5 million. It gets kind of wild, and it gets very intense and intricate on the insurance level, depending on what you're hauling and what your customer requires. The bigger the organization that your customer is, the more insurance they're going to probably require. And ironically, the less they know about why they want that insurance. They just know that, we require it, so you better have it. Totally different discussion there, but. Yeah, you don't need anything, technically, but you're going to want it so you can get in the door with certain customers.
I would say rule of thumb, you should have a policy of contingent cargo at 100K and $1 million in general liability, and it's pretty commonplace for most shippers to be asked to be named on your deck page, which is really just the page that says, hey, if something happens, this is who gets paid out. So pretty common practice when you're getting on board with a shipper is they're going to ask you if you have your 100 and $1 million. Call your insurance agent, ask them to be added to a deck page. You send that over with your W-9. That pretty much covers it.
Yeah, a lot of times they'll say, list me as a cert holder on your COI. So they want to be a certificate holder on that certificate of insurance. A lot of times you'll see these Accord 25 forms that list your insurance, that checks the box on what you have, the values of it, who the agent is, the underwriting insurance company, and then it'll list the certificate holder in the bottom. So, again, not an episode on insurance, but good discussion. And you're going to run into this.
We get a lot.
Yeah,
exactly. And it's really common. Let me ask you this. I mean, in your entire career, how often have you seen contingent cargo payout, like from a practical standpoint?
I think once. So here's the thing on contingent cargo too. And about 5 years ago, I was at an agent conference where had a bunch of freight agents in town, and we brought in the insurance broker that we used, right? And he came in and he talked about, here is what we as a brokerage have and how we can use it to help sell to our customers. And the discussion of contingent cargo came up, and contingent cargo, just like any other insurance product, depends on the specifics of what's included in your individual policy. Because you could have a contingent cargo policy that covers everything, but it's going to be so expensive that it's not worth it. So the majority of things that contingent cargo covers in most brokers' cases is very, very rarely going to ever be used. But a lot of customers want to see it, and it's very inexpensive, so it's usually worth it for you to have it. So, to generalize it, what it means is if the carrier's insurance, for some reason they find a loophole and they're not going to pay out, you're hoping that your contingent cargo is going to pick up that insurance payout. Doesn't always happen, though, because you might not be covered for whatever it was rejected for. So those are the things. A good insurance agent they're going to tell you, here's the best way to offset your risk. Here's what we want to have in your policy, all that good stuff. So that's insurance.
So rounding off insurance, we are onto the BOC3s and processing agents. So first off, like, what is a processing agent? Why does anybody need one? What do they actually do?
So it's funny. I did not know the answer to this the first like 5 or 6 years I was in this industry, because I've never had to deal with a situation where they were ever used. But yeah, so as part of your setup, you're going to have to submit form BOC3, and that is it's a designation of your process agents. There's an official title for it. I think it's designation for agents of process or something like that. But essentially, what is a process agent, right? They are someone that can be served on your behalf, right? So let's say, Ben, you are in Florida, right? Your business is based out of Florida, but you're involved in a lawsuit in Virginia, right? How are they going to serve you in Virginia with court papers? You're not there. So you have to have somebody that represents you in the state of, the Commonwealth of Virginia that can be physically handed your court documents, and then it's their responsibility to forward them on to you. So you are required to have a process agent designated in every single state that you operate. So 50 U.S. states, there's process agent companies that you can just hire for pretty cheap, and they will designate someone for you in all 50 states on their behalf, or on your behalf, essentially. So that way, if you get sued in Virginia or California or Hawaii or Alaska, wherever, they've got someone that is designated on your form that says, oh, if we got to go sue Ben, we're going to hand the papers to this person because they're in Wyoming or whatever. So
it's really basically just for like the antiquated system of having to hand somebody a handful of documents to serve them, right?
Yeah,
like you see in the movies when they're chasing somebody down to serve them with papers.
You've been served, and it's really what it is. And we're not the only industry that has this. There's other industries as well. A lot of it, there's a lot of process agents involved in international type business. I know, like, if you just do a little Google search on it, you'll find laws in like UK and other European countries that has the same sort of requirements in place. So that's really all a process agent is. There's a form that literally lists out all 50 states in the United States, and it says who's the agent, they need like name, phone number, and address. But you can go to like a process agent company, pay like $50, and they'll just do it for you, and they'll submit it for you, because that form has to be electronically submitted to the FMCSA. So by the time your application is done for your authority, they're going to want to have that BOC3 to show you've got your process agents, and they're going to want to see that bond or trust to show you've got your 75K in place. So that's the process. So
BOC3.
Here's what I'm going to tell you, man. In the current day and age, I think it's silly to have process agents. Dude, just do it electronically. We had a pandemic and everyone worked from home. Like, no one's out serving court papers anyway in person. A lot of it is going to be electronic for the most part for a lot of this stuff. But
regardless, still regulation. You still need it. It's still a box you need to check, right? So the final one that we're going to UCR, the Unified Carrier Registration.
Yeah, so this is fairly new. I want to say 2015, if I have it correctly in my mind, is when this system came into play. So during the Obama administration, there was a lot of things that went into play in the transportation sector. Things like introducing ELDs as a requirement, this Unified Carrier Registration. I'll be honest, I think the UCR, Unified Carrier Registration, I think it's just another moneymaker. But really what it is it's another registration system to make sure they've got all broker and carriers information, and they usually want like an update every 1 year on this. So you're typically, I think it's like $59 a year to renew your registration with them. But that whole, again, if you go through a process with a company like DAT that'll walk you through getting your authority, they'll take care of all this stuff for you and help you do it. But that UCR, you can just go online yourself and do it. I know, like, brokerage I work for, every year they submit their renewal form, pay the $59, and good to go. It's literally all it is. You could, if you have any updates to, like, for example, your address, or like for carriers, they've got more trucks or more drivers, that stuff gets updated in there. It's just, in my mind, it's another system that,
Is it usable at all for like other people? Like I don't know. I don't know
I
anyone
don't think
that
so.
uses it for,
I have
like,
no
anything.
idea. Yeah, I don't know. And you can go on FMCSA's website and it'll tell you more about it. But I believe there was if you were a broker before that 2015, there was some kind of like grandfather thing where you didn't have to do it right away. But if you're doing it right now, if you're a new broker, you have to register in there. So
in summary, right, we need our license. We're going to need a DOT and MC number unless you are an interstate carrier. You are going to need a bond.
No, as a broker, think about you're only doing intrastate business and it's all legal. There's not basically just here's our advice. MC and DOT is what you're going to get. Yes.
So your MC DOT, you do not need it per the federal government insurance, but you likely will need 100 in contingent and $1 million in general liability. What you will be required is a surety bond in the amount of 75 grand face value. You'll get that through an insurance provider.
Unless you get the trust fund.
Correct. You will need processing agents in all 50 states. I would bet you probably only really need them in 48, but there's really not much cost.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you could just pay the $50 or whatever it is, you're just gonna do all of them. It's cheap.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then finally, the small, roughly $59 fee for the UCR.
Yeah.
And you're in business.
You're in business, man. So that's when we talk about the low barrier to entry. That's it. No one had to take a test. You don't even have to speak good English. You don't have to be literate. I mean, this is how easy it is. And this is one of the dangers, right? So when double brokering comes into play, you got to remember there could be someone out there that got in the system this easily. They're a carrier and they've got their brokerage authority. They might double broker your stuff. They have no idea what's going on. So
the other big risk to that is, and to be honest, it's also not just low barrier to new companies. It's also when a company operates unethically, like it's been very common in the industry that they'll just fold that MC, get a new one, and just move their business there.
Oh, yeah.
So that's another thing that happens pretty common in the industry when you have a low barrier to really just start a new business.
Think about how cheap this is. Like, so your authority, $300. Your bond, let's say you got good credit, $1,500 for your first year. Process agents, $50. UCR, $59. Literally, for $2,000, you're in business. That's insane.
Can't really function, but you are in business.
You can't cash flow. You don't have board boards. You don't have TMS. You don't have anything. But you can get in business and be up and running and call yourself a freight broker legally. So, man. That's good stuff. We're going to have a video coming out on BOC3 in a little more detail, I think, in the next week or two. So stay tuned for that on YouTube. We got some questions today we want to cover. But first, a shout out to our friends over at Lean Solutions Group. We got to have Trey on here again soon. I got to ask him what he thinks about his Chiefs being 500 midway through the season. But Lean Solutions Group, you got lean sales, lean staffing, lean tech, and lean marketing. We are customers of Lean. We trust and believe in their service and what they have as a solution. Literally, you and I talked about this the other day. We're like, if we had just hired somebody to do our marketing and, SEO and social media management, we hired them and, locally ourselves, we'd be paying about twice the price, and we've got a team of people handling. So they use the nearshore model with their offices down in Colombia, South America, and you get great trained professionals to assist you in all four of those categories at a fraction of the price. So go to leangroup.com and check them out. All right.
Q&A.
Yeah, man. Let's
see.
I'm
going to lead off with, how can I protect my book of business when I'm switching companies? I think there's probably some assumptions in here. I would say the first is...
Yeah, what are we going to assume here? Because, there's a lot of different ways to answer this.
We'll assume you don't have a non-compete.
Yep.
And we'll assume you don't have a non-solicit.
Yep. Okay.
How do you protect it?
I have to coach people on this a lot because when an agent moves from one company to another, their book of business needs to move with them. And they're like, hey, I'm afraid if I tell them that I'm leaving, that they're just going to go poach my customers and blah, blah, blah. Here's the deal. Your book of business is worth its weight in gold. Those relationships are what matters, more so than which company is invoicing them, right? So have a conversation with your customers if you are going to make a switch. So they're not just all of a sudden invoiced by a new brokerage one day. If you're going to move, talk to your customers first. Same thing with your carriers, right? Get that stuff laid out all the time. That is the best way to do it. Let them know, hey, I'm going to be moving to this other company, and here's why, right? It's giving me a better opportunity to serve you as my customer and to take care of my business and my family. And if you've got a good relationship with them, the business will follow. It will, right? You might run into the new brokerage. Maybe you can't work with a certain customer because someone else has them, or whatever. But have a conversation.
There are a lot of viable reasons, but we hear this time and time again that shippers, they want to work with that human being, right? That's who they have a relationship with. They view their brokers as an extension, really, of their supply chain. Yeah. Especially ones that have worked with them for years. They know their ins and outs, their SOP, the lanes, the carriers. Like, that is valuable, right? That's the value we're talking about. And that's why I don't want to say the brokerage you work for doesn't matter as much, but that's what they're holding on to. That's the sustainability of it. And that's also why when we talked in other episodes about like selling a brokerage, like those don't necessarily go with it all the time, because the brokers are usually going to be the ones that take the business, which is why there's such a back and forth on non-competes in the industry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, those non-competes, literally, like companies like TQL and Integrity Express, I've dealt with these. Their goal is just make you sit on the sidelines. That's literally all they want you to do. Whether or not they can retain the business, they just don't want you to take it somewhere else. They know that they're going to bring someone new in. They'll replace your business with someone else's business, but they just don't want you to compete. They want you to sit on the sidelines. All right, next, how do I invoice my customer? This came from someone that was in coaching and taking our course, new broker. And it's a good question, right? It's a good question to have because, hey, you moved a load, now you got to send an invoice, right? That's a win. But, hey, you don't actually realize that gain until you receive money, so you got to send an invoice. Here's the deal. If you have the right software in place, it will generate an invoice for you. So TMSs, right? Like we have a promo code for Extend TMS. I've seen and done it myself, generated invoices in there. You click a button, boom, generates an invoice. You can email it out. You can print it if you want. You can download it and attach it in your Outlook, however you want to do it. If you have an accounting suite like QuickBooks Online or Great Plains, you can do invoicing in there depending on which system you're using. If you don't have any software and you have to make an invoice, you could probably find a template online. I've done that before. Actually, some of the first invoices we sent from 360, I generated myself because we didn't have QuickBooks or anything yet. Actually, I think I still use them because they're pretty good templates.
Well, yeah, I mean, what's important? So let's just break it down Barney style, right? What needs to be included in an invoice?
Yep.
Just some basic
bare bones. Your customer's info, right? Make sure it's got their name and their address and all that stuff. You want to have the service you provided and the charge for it. So you could just say like, truckload or line haul, $2,000. And then you want to have the remit to information. Remit to means how can they pay you, right? ACH, online, paper check, you name it, right? How can they pay you? And then your terms. When is it due? Is it due in net 30? Is there a discount if they pay it early? Is there a fee if they pay it late? That's stuff.
One final thing. An only final thing I think we missed is it should have its own unique number so that it can be referenced later.
Yeah, an invoice number. That way it's differentiated from any other invoice. Yep. A lot of people, what they'll do with invoices is they'll go with like a 6-digit number or something, and they'll pick a starting number like, 4,053, and the next one's 4,054. Some people will avoid doing invoice number 1 because they're like, oh, they're going to know I'm brand new. But so pick a number, start there. And most TMSs and accounting programs will let you pick your starting invoice number, and it just goes up and up and up from that point on. So good stuff.
Number 3, how do I handle customer routed freight?
I love this. So I'll tell you what I told someone literally today. I said, my customer is telling me, or my prospect is telling me that their freight's customer routed. Is it worth me following up, or should I give it up? And I said, well, sometimes they're just using this as an objection because they want to get you off the phone. But sometimes it's real. And I said, if you find out that it's real, ask them who their customer is that's routing it, and pick up the phone and start calling again.
Absolutely. It's the rabbit hole, right? In prospecting, one of the things you always want to look is to be able to pivot and ask more questions, right? If in the simplest way, like when I teach this, I'm like, just think about your prospect as like a standalone building, right?
Yeah.
If something comes out of it, it had to go into it, right? So just think of it that way. Hey, if your stuff's customer routed, hey, absolutely. First off, do they ever ask for referrals? Do they ever have issues getting their freight picked up from you? Because just because it's customer routed doesn't mean trucks don't fall out on their customer, and doesn't mean they don't leave loads on the dock of the prospect you're talking to. So there could be an opportunity. The final question I'm going to ask is, hey, so do you guys tender your inbound freight, or do you have that routed from your supplier? Because there are still opportunities, and they can still be very profitable. And the most important part of asking these questions is, it's the litmus test for me to basically tell whether or not they were bullshitting me, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, if they can answer those questions pretty quickly and conversationally, then I'm pretty confident that it really was customer routed, because most people don't continue to follow up. And you can hear that in their voice usually anyway.
Yeah, and if they hang up on you during that process, it was probably an objection and just a bad time. Yeah. Give them a call in another week or two. So, yeah, it's a common objection. Here's the reason they use it, because it works for the majority of new brokers. Because the broker's like, okay, thanks, bye. And they don't know how to handle that, which is exactly why somebody asked that question. So cool, man, good stuff.
It's anonymous with FOB. If you hear we're FOB, it's the same thing. Freight on board, paid by customer, routed by customer.
Yep. And FOB, FOB origin destination is basically who controls that freight. Is it the person at the origin, which would be your outbound controller, or is it FOB destination, which would be, their customer is the one that's routing it and hiring the truck. So absolutely. So FOB or custom routed means it's the same thing. Sweet, man. That's a good episode. Coming up the pipeline here. We don't have a date yet, but later this year, another webinar with DAT. We're going to do more prospecting talk. Hopefully it'll actually record this time. We had a chance to send out the slide deck today for the last webinar that we did. So at least if you missed the 5 ways to get new shipper, find more shippers, you have a list of the bullet points. But
yeah, to be honest, we don't talk about this much, but if you are a listener and you've been a fan and following us, make sure you've signed up for the newsletter. We've changed it a lot. We make sure that basically whatever we're talking about, whatever that topic is, we're putting that out in the newsletter, which is going to give you just a few different ways to digest it, really.
Yeah.
Whether it's the blog, whether it's a YouTube video we're doing on another topic, or the podcast, we're sending that on a weekly basis. So we're not going to blow up your inbox. We're not exactly spamming anybody to sell anything.
Yeah.
But it's a great value add if you haven't signed up for it.
I'll tell you, man, we've got it to a way that I'm not seeing a whole lot of unsubscribes anymore. It's basically once a week, quick little digest roll up of here's our newest content. If you want it, you got a link for it. Like I said, podcast, blog, YouTube video, anything cool and exciting that's upcoming, and check it out. Some people just see it and they're like, sweet, delete it. And we get a lot of people that you can see the stats. They're going through it and they're consuming the content. So it's good stuff. And we're not getting a lot of unsubscribes. So thanks everyone for being on there. We got a couple thousand in the newsletter distribution now that have signed up. So we appreciate all of you. Our following is grown tremendously. We got to be close to that 100,000 download point now.
And another thing too for our listeners, we now have a actual presence on Facebook. Nate and I had been doing it for about the past year, and I'll be honest, some of it was sporadic, and to be honest, Lean's doing a lot of it. So we're helping, lay down where we want it to go. We're overseeing the artwork and whatnot, but there's a lot of really cool stuff they're putting on our Facebook page. They're taking some of the long form podcasts and turning them into, 1 and 2 minute videos that really just answer some of the questions. So if you haven't yet, follow us, like us on, I guess you can't really follow somebody on Facebook, but
I think you just like the page, right?
Yeah.
You can follow it, I guess. Because you can like something and then unfollow it so you don't see all their updates on your newsfeed, I think.
And Instagram. So in any of those places, if you haven't added us, add us. Let us know what you think. If you like what you're seeing there, throw a comment in there. We would appreciate it. Any support and all support is greatly appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. Well, cool, man. This weekend, Bills, I think, are going to cover the 14.5 points against Jacksonville, and I'm pretty sure Pittsburgh will cover their 6.5 on Monday Night Football at home against the Bears. So I'm giving Buffalo. They're going to get 40 points. I don't know why I'm saying that, but they're going to get 40 points. I said that last week and they didn't, but it's okay.
We'll see.
Any closing final thoughts here, Ben?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, I did see snow the other day here in Buffalo. Go Bills.